Are we ready in the sound booth? Hurry, Milt.
Thank you, sir.
Little trouble back there?
A phone call from the farm from Matt, Early Worry's son.
Oh.
What I had done for pig chores.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
not a problem. We're just sitting here waiting for you. Let me know when we're ready. Okay, we're live. Gonna call this meeting to order. Little trouble back there? Whoa, I got a delay. Echo. Oh.
What I had done for pig chores.
Okay. All right, I'm confident the sound technician will work that out. Okay, so the meeting is called to order. Are there any written comments from the clerk? This is strictly for the, public hearing on the budget. Any comments from the clerk?
No.
There are no written comments received. Are there any comments from the public on the budget, on the proposed 2021 budget?
Yes.
Yes, where?
Robert Stearns.
Yes. Public hearing on the budget. Any comments from the clerk? No. There are no written comments received. Are there any comments from the public on the proposed 2021? It's amazing how I can do that without moving my lips.
Frank Willis.
Practice, sir. Practice at church.
Have we got this resolved?
Good. Chairman, members of the board, I'd like to take a minute to discuss the decision that the executive committee made to freeze the plan this year. It was said that some of us advocated for adequate pay increase and previously advocated for not reopening the county, that these two are not disconnected. I am and I was one of those. Yes, we closed the doors. We eliminated the potential contact spreading that we did not stop providing services to this county. We came to work and we figured out how to work from home, with some of us still teaching our children and taking care of them at home while working. Some departments designed split shifts to minimize people in the office. Whatever it took, we still continue to provide services. Yes, I agree. It's been a difficult year for all of us, even though still maintaining employment. An example of these are my office has tripled the amount of money awarded to our veterans. We processed more claims and increased our annual income to the county by nearly double last year. We continue to outreach and provide more donations than any other year in order to help the veterans. The sheriff and his staff maintain safety of themselves, the public, and the incarcerated. The courthouse had to figure out how to go virtual for continuity of law. Cindy's crew and human services worked 16 hours a day and weekends to do what was demanded. Michelle's staff had to go out and find how to take tax income. Jamie's staff tried to figure out how to run elections. Jermaine's people still trying to provide documentation. And Ross, our IT, tirelessly getting the county able to do everything electronically and virtually. I could go on and on. Every department rose to the task, even if it meant the department heads and staff working long hours and weekends or after hours to get the job done. We talked about the private sectors. Companies reward employees that came in day in and day out, providing services in time of crisis with bonuses. The companies are not adjusting their pay plans. Knowing their value of an employee with a good morale is key. I don't take that for granted that some have been impacted more than others, and we are not unsympathetic to the public. Why would the board deny to follow the pay plan that was already imposed? Some companies use a flat basis, and there's never a discussion. And we look across companies, the standard is 2 to 3%, and some reward outstanding service with bigger increases. This is what we had before. The pay plan was briefed and told to the employees that step plans were locked, and that the only discussion was the COLA each year. It was stated that the COLA increase number would be used in the board determining if the county was going to give on based on the federal COLA that comes out each year. Looking back at the minutes from those meetings, the federal government said the COLA went up this year, so why are we in discussion? I am not new to this kind of pay plan. The U.S. military forces, which I provided to you, goes by rank and years of service. This is an automatic increase. It is only the COLA that is questioned each year by the Congress and awarded if it goes up. So what measures are we using to not implement the pay plan? Do we use unemployment numbers compared to last year? Well, I've attached that also to the documents I provided, 2017 to 2020. Our county is not in worse shape than the previous years. I will also call your attention that in these previous years, COLA was paid. Currently, 3.8% of our county is unemployed. Pre-COVID in February 2020 was 3.8%, and in January of 2020 was 4.1%. The Bureau of Labor Statistics also reports that the labor rates across the nation has increased by 2.7%. How do we maintain our competitive wage rate when we're not just keeping up with the rest? Over half the counties in Wisconsin are following their pay schedules and doing a COLA, or some counties call it a competitive labor increase like Brown County. I've also attached those documents. The federal government uses the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, also known as the CPIU, for determining the COLA rate. I've attached this document as well. It covers everything from food to fuel and how much more it costs compared to previous years. My last point is, I believe the administrator and the finance director are good stewards of the county's financials. They both look in great lengths at the budget prior to recommendations being made. They look at the general fund and the impacts both present and future. They consider the sustainability of the budget and look at the numbers continuously. The board places them in these positions to make determinations and recommendations. If they say it's financially prudent and sound to be able to pay the pay plan, the COLA, then why should that not be good? The administrator has provided the impact and the financial director has crunched the numbers. I think we as employees deserve more consideration. Give us department heads a reason. We cannot afford it without taxes going up. Got it. And our employees will also understand this, but this is not the case. And in fact, the county tax rate is actually going down this year with the proposed plan. If the COLA is used in conjunction with the pay plan, then let's use it. Would next year we resume the pay plan, or are we going to skip ahead the steps in order to maintain our current rate? $47,000 is the difference in this budget. So is the budget so tight that we could not have been worked out? If the employees decide to take healthcare that was not previously taken last year, that would increase the budget by $35,000. So there has to be maneuverability in the budget. If this was a thought, why shouldn't the department heads have been given the heads up in August so we could try to look in our budgets and find it for the employees? I certainly would have looked very hard. In September, the executive meeting, when the members approved raises based on performance or changes or adding employees, how can we afford that? Shouldn't the board have looked at the COLA and the pay plan first to determine if we should support what was already promised to our employees and then consider other pay increases? I believe the employees that were given them do deserve them, but a few individuals versus the entire county staff. What about the money that was saved this year on positions that were vacated, i.e. the human resource director or UW extension? What about the money the state and federal government are reimbursing the county next year? What about the money that the department saved this year not doing travel or attending conferences? I appreciate your time.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Sheriff Joski.
Good evening. I've been told that I'm a fast talker, but Rob, I can't even hold a candle to you. All right, so I just wanted to go over real quick. I know some of you from the executive committee have already heard me speak, so I don't want to, drag this out any farther than I need to. I do want to thank the executive committee for revisiting the issue. So on the first issue or the first meeting, it basically was stated that there were concerns over the challenges that our community face, which I agree with, that there was a need to do something, that we have a need to do something in order to show sensitivity to our communities. So at that point, the cost of living was tossed, a new pay plan was developed kind of on the fly. To your credit, you came back that next meeting and revisited it. First rule in military, you find yourself in a bad position, don't push a bad position. Thank you for realigning and reevaluating that position. So now we have a cost of living that's back in place and a pay plan that's under question. That basically the motion was that we're going to freeze it and then we want to review it because we feel maybe it's a little bit too generous. So we got sort of some mixed messages. I understand that we want to be sensitive to the community. I'm in there every day fighting in the trenches. I understand the challenges of our community. But then on the other hand, we're saying, yeah, this pay plan, we think it's too generous. These employees are getting too much. And so we want to make sure that the message we do send to those folks working under us is crystal clear. That's something I think that each one of us have to own. We have to take that responsibility very serious, that in everything we do, in everything we say, and in every vote that we cast is a message, is a sense of communication to those people working for us. So let's be very careful with that. The second thing and the final point is going to be trust. We have to have trust in each other. This is not an adversarial environment. This is not us versus you as those of us working every day in the trenches. We are doing this with you. We're also members of the community. We have the finance director, your county administrator. We need to have trust, right? The people that put us in these offices trust us. The county board needs to trust its subcommittees, and the subcommittees need to trust those department heads and those folks that are working in this every day to say, this is what we're seeing. This is our reality. And then base your decisions on that. So we have to trust what goes forward. In some cases with this pay plan, it was literally voted on by some of you in the room currently. So trust your work. Trust all the data collection, all the work that was done. Trust it. It was a good product. It was solid. There's not a lot of times in county government that we get things right. But that pay plan, as it was rolled out last year, I think we got it right. I think we got it right. And all we have to do now is focus on that cost of living And that can be our throttle, right? As things are going forward, if we need to throttle up or throttle back, that's something that we can adjust. But as I stated at the executive committee, it's sort of like steering a ship. When you see something your way, you don't just spin that wheel hard right or hard left. You make some minor adjustments. And I think, unfortunately, what we're seeing is a lot of this spinning the wheel hard left and hard right. And the only option there is putting this whole thing up on the beach. So let's be very cautious and frugal about the decisions we make. But again, I thank you for everything you've done so far. And again, we're on the same team. Let's all stick together and we'll get through this together. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Does anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else wish to speak? No further comments? Then I would look for a motion to adjourn the public hearing on the budget.
I'll move.
Supervisor Wagner, seconded by Supervisor Romden. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. We'll now move into the regularly scheduled county board meeting. Call that meeting to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance and prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We pray. Almighty God, with thanks that all we have and enjoy is a gift from you, we acknowledge your many benefits. We come before you today in heartfelt appreciation for our nation and its people. You have enriched us with the bounties of farm and factory, the beauty of forest and mountain, and the marvels of medicine and science. For all these blessings, we praise and glorify you. Look with favor upon our nation and preserve our cherished liberties. Enable us to govern with wisdom, honesty, courage, and justice. Protect those who serve in the armed forces and those who maintain peace and safety in our communities. Give us willingness to obey our nation's laws and to work for the common good. Keep our financial institutions secure and our economy strong. Guard us from calamities of nature and accident, and spare our land from the ravages of disease and pandemic. Strengthen the homes of our nation. By your Spirit, lead husbands and wives to love each other, parents to nurture their children, young adults to assume responsibility, and children to show respect. Especially grant that as we approach the upcoming elections, we would be filled with the wisdom and guidance which you send us. To you, O Lord, we bring our thanks and our request. Hear our prayers for Jesus' sake. Amen. Roll call.
One absent, Supervisor Peisler.
We'll look for a motion to approve the agenda which you have before you. Supervisor Swagel.
I so move to approve the agenda.
Second by Supervisor Haskey. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Agenda is adopted. Approve previous county board minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting? Supervisor Augustine. Second, Supervisor Lazansky. Are there comments, questions, discussion, corrections on the minutes? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Citizens input. Do we have any signed up?
I have none.
We have none. Anybody wish to speak to the board in regular meeting? Anyone wish to speak? Anyone wish to speak? Appointments. Local Emergency Planning Committee would look for a, would request a motion to approve those appointments. Supervisor Poppy, and seconded by Supervisor Augustine. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Annual reports and other reports to the board is requested. Kewaunee County Administrator, do you have a report?
I have a couple things, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Proceed.
I know that there had been some questions from some supervisors regarding whether the public health emergency was still in force or not. And so I had put in front of each of you a copy of that resolution that was passed back in March, as well as a sheet of the 4 emergency orders that have taken place so far. So just so everyone is aware, the public health emergency is still in effect until we decide at such time to ask that emergency be rescinded. Second, I did, again, regarding the pandemic, I did want to read an email that I had received just last week. Good afternoon, Mr. Felt. I had the pleasure to experience the professionalism of Cindy during my recent COVID-19 illness. I wish I could tell you the exact dates of our conversations, but I was so ill, it is all just a fog. Day 1 conversation was reassurance that someone truly cared about my well-being. Cindy called me every other day for weeks. Upon her strong advice, I called my healthcare provider, whom I had been in contact with many times and was only told to go to the ER. I told the office it was recommended I put on an antibiotic because I had been coughing for 3 weeks and was just getting weaker. My doctor agreed, and within 36 hours of taking the drug, I was feeling stronger. No one from the doctor's office ever called to check on me. I felt completely lost in the COVID maze. Cindy was the only person, besides my poor husband, who was sick with worry about me and ill himself, who truly cared about my progress. I knew when the phone rang at 9:45 in the morning, it would be Cindy's kind, caring voice to ask me how I was feeling. She wanted to know everything from temperature numbers to how long I was sleeping and if I was able to get up and move without difficulty breathing. I looked forward to hearing her soothing voice, and it was like a warm blanket that gave me comfort. I know that's part of a nurse's oath to take care and give your best, but Cindy works from her heart and truly cares about all her Kewaunee County residents. I look forward to the day I can meet and hug her because I will never forget the comfort I received from a complete stranger. We are lucky to have such a dedicated, caring, wise woman working for all of us. Please acknowledge Cindy with your colleagues and board members. Thank you, Mr. Felt. And that was from Lisa Zatko in Kewaunee. I just wanted to kind of give an example of, it's not just Cindy, it's the entire public health staff. I now have a even more appreciation to it because my wife has been recruited to do some contact tracing. I'll say it that way. So we know quite well as to the amount of time that is needed, not only during the day, but in evenings and on weekends. And so I just wanted to take that opportunity to thank Cindy and her entire staff for the work that she is doing regarding COVID, as well as they are continuing to do flu vaccines and immunizations. And the other thing that I know is, if you've been reading in the paper, you have neighboring counties that have given up doing their contact tracing. Kewaunee County still does its contact tracing and finishes it within 24 hours. That is not what is happening in neighboring counties. This is a testament to Cindy and her staff. So those were the things that I had regarding the public health emergency and COVID. I guess the question that I would have from the chair and from the committee is, there's not a specific place here within the agenda as to going over the county budget. We usually like to do that during this time. I'm not sure if that was wanting to have been done during public
Public hearing.
comment, but if it would please the chair and the board, I would kind of give a quick summary as to the 2021 proposed budget.
I would suggest that we do it here. It would be the best place, and I am sure that a lot of the supervisors probably Well, if not, if they don't have questions that you answer through the course of your presentation, I'm sure they'll have questions they want to ask you.
Absolutely. And I welcome questions. And if I cannot answer them, there's a smarter man in this room who can answer them. And he is to my left, your right, Finance Director Paul Kunish.
Gary?
So I'll start first with the toughest part with doing a quick summary sheet, and I put these also on your desks, is it's tough to decide what may be items of interest. So I just kind of picked some that may be of interest. So that way, for those of you that are going line by line, you may go, well, why is that there? And I didn't do that for every single department and for every single line. If that were the case, then this would be a 6-hour meeting and half of you would leave well within hour one because you don't want to hear me drone on for that long. So I'll start first. As you see, I kind of did the department. I did the page that is in your budget as for what the line is, and then just kind of some comments there. So in the administrator's budget on page 25, there's a line called contracted services. Now, last year, those contracted services were a 911 study, a housing study, and part of the jail study. We did not put any of the jail study into this year's budget only because we do not know what that number is. So I wasn't even going to take a guess because we are still trying to figure out what the preliminary cost of the total project would be. And phase 3 is a percentage of that project. But I had put in $5,000 to try to provide some Six Sigma Yellow Belt training for myself, but with other needs, whether they were IT or whether they were sheriff's outlay, we did recommend the removal of that, and the Finance Committee did remove the funds from that line to those other needs in those other departments. In that same respect, on page 25, you have the professional development line. That is again to provide employee training, whether that is process improvement, whether that is supervisor training. I think the best thing that we can start to do is make a concerted effort to invest in our staff, especially our managerial staff. And so I wanted to place some money in there to do that. We have, the Finance Committee has made some reductions in that line item to do some other, to fill in some other holes in other departments, but there is still money left in that line. As for the Public Information Officer Tourism, I have no items to really bring before the committee. And I'm sorry, as a point of order, if we're at a specific department and you have a question, please feel free to ask at that time. You do not have to wait for me to finish all the way to the end. It's probably best that we do this department by department. So what I'll do is I will slightly pause after each department, and if I hear nothing, I will continue on. I will then go to child support. On page 31, in outlay, we budgeted $2,500 for a shredder. The shredder that is currently under the child support department works just fine, but we are going to transfer that shredder to the human services department and buy a new shredder under child support. And part of the reason why we do that is because by buying that piece of equipment for the child support agency, we can actually have part of the cost of that piece of equipment reimbursed. So we're saving a little bit of money by doing it that way. Next, we'll go to Circuit Court, of which I have no items there. There's only one state employee within the Circuit Court, that is the judicial assistant to the judge. Otherwise, all other employees within the court system are state employees. Next, we go to Clerk of Courts. On page 43, you see guardian ad litem fees and legal fees. There was an increase last year, and there is again an increase this year, and that is due to the state legislature has increased the reimbursement rates for attorneys that provide those services from $70 an hour to $100 an hour. So subsequently, we have to, and that's not a choice. We must pay the attorneys that cost. So subsequently, we have that increase in cost for the guardian ad litem and the legal fees. Next, I will go on to the coroner. The coroner tries as much as possible to estimate how much money he would need for medical examiner services. This year, there has been a large uptick in the need for medical examining services. He believes that he will need that as well. So if we go from an average standpoint, there is a slight increase in the average for medical services. That is not something that the coroner can do himself. The coroner is a nurse. He is not a pathologist or a medical doctor, so therefore cannot provide those services. We contract out with other counties to do that service for us. If not, I'll go on to Corporation Counsel. There again, I have no items regarding Corporation Counsel. I then move on to County Board. From the County Board on page 61, the one item that I put in there was membership dues. Membership dues deals with the county's membership in the Wisconsin Counties Association, Bay Lakes Regional Planning, Wisconsin County Utility Tax Association, so a variety of county organizations of which Kewaunee County is a member. You may also see in the budget as well salaries. The $5,867 is the exorbitant salary of our chairman. That has not changed in years. Also, you see in committee members per diem and county board. He did not ask for one, nor did I propose one.
But if you want to talk about,
As for committee per diem, that is again for county board members that attend committees. That is separate than the county board per diem. The county board per diem is for board members that attend county board meetings. If we remember, the per diem for a county board meeting is $100 per meeting. So if you do $100 times 20 times 12 months, that comes out to $24,000. And we try to make an estimate as to the committees and how many there. 40,000 has usually been, over the course of history, a pretty good number.
no cost of living on that?
No, the previous year I did try to reduce the amount of per diem, and that was rebuffed. Next, we'll go to county clerk. Again, if you're looking at, and that's on page 69, if you look at the outlay from last year to this year, you would see a significant increase. But the reason for that is that the county is purchasing the voting machines. And you would see that then from the expense side. But I also want to remind the board that 50% of those voting machines are going to be paid by the local municipalities. So there is an increase, but there is also a partially offsetting revenue increase to pay for those voting machines. And if you remember just a few months ago, Madam Clerk and I had explained how the voting machines are coming to their to the end of their useful life, and we were getting a good deal, a reduction in cost if we were to purchase them this year. And so the board did approve that purchase. Next, going on to district attorney, I have no items for district attorney. If we then go to emergency management, previously there had been no department that was in charge of the maintenance of our towers. The county does own 3 different towers, and these are not the maintenance. When we say tower maintenance here, this is not the maintenance of the new towers that are going to be constructed. I want to remind the board that those towers being constructed are owned and maintained by Bug Tussle Wireless. They are not county-owned towers that are being constructed. So, but I wanted there to be a specific department in control and oversight of the management of those towers, the maintenance and inspections, and so that line item is under emergency management. Family Court Commissioner, I have no items. We contract out with William Wolski, who's a local attorney in Kewaunee. He has been our Family Court Commissioner for many years. He continues to do that, and there have been no issues whatsoever. We may eventually, as a board, need to decide the future of the Family Court Commissioner, as Mr. Wolski, while very, very spry and energetic, is close to that. If anytime he wanted to, he could retire, and the county would need to have to decide how to provide Family Court Commissioner services. Next, I'll move on to finance. On page 106, you have maintenance agreements. Some of the increase in that comes from the annual maintenance cost of our timekeeping system, Time Clock Plus, as well as some of our other software programs. In addition, under travel, the finance director has requested that he be able to attend, if it even happens, the National GFOA conference in Chicago. The GFOA conferences do provide a lot of good information for our folks, for our finance director, as well as helps to provide education as to what is the latest going on from what do we want to call it? The different accounting standards and changes in accounting rules. This would not be requested unless it was close by. The finance director would not request, nor have I ever seen it. If it was in Honolulu or someplace like that, he would not request it, nor would I approve it. So. Next, on page 108, you will see sales tax revenue.
Hold on, on
sure.
the, under the finance on page 106, can you just tell me briefly, what do we have on 000219, line 219 there, or the code
Other
219,
professional
other
services?
professional services, and the one above it? Why were those zero and now we have 25,000 and 8,800?
Yeah, if you look down to the bottom of the page, there were two separate activities, one called special accounting.
Okay,
I just combined them into one.
okay, so it's just changing the way that they're listed. Thank you.
I'll go on to the non-department debt service on page 108. Last year, we had budgeted $1.1 million in sales tax revenue towards the budget. This year, we are increasing that revenue projection by $50,000 to $1.15 million. Last year, we collected $1.25 million in sales tax revenue. This year, we are still above, from year to date, we look to collect even more than what we did last year. But from a fiscal management standpoint, I do not find it prudent to budget for every single dollar of sales tax revenue that we think we're going to receive. And the reason why I do that is because if for some reason there's an economic downturn and our sales tax revenues go down, then we have a deficit that somehow we have to make up. And there's no better example of that right now during this pandemic than Door County, that relies very heavily on their sales tax revenues and how that has negatively affected their county finances. Next, I would go to the utility tax. The revenues had decreased by about $33,500. The reason for that is not only a formula, but if you remember, it wasn't that long ago that we had some of the wind towers were taken down. And so the county receives utility tax revenue for for wind towers. For when the Kewaunee Power Station was in operation, we received utility tax. In that case, we get utility tax even for power lines. There's a formula, but with the loss of those wind towers, there was a reduction in the utility tax. In that same respect, on page 108, the contingency account remains at $100,000. We can continue to do that. When we first decided to do the budget and we squeezed out a lot of discretionary money out of the different departments, we did that because what was happening is we were having departments that were having essentially their own little contingency accounts within their own departments. So we decided to reduce those accounts in those specific departments and create one contingency account, which then departments would come to the finance committee, and if there were financial needs, then they would come there, explain their justification, and it would be approved then from the contingency account. Also on page 108 is funding for the Violence Intervention Project and KCEDC. The funding level for Violence Intervention Project is $26,000, which is the same as what it was last year, which is roughly what it has been for the 5 years that I've been here. There was one small increase, I believe, 2 years ago for VIP. KCDC, I'm recommending a funding level of $40,000, which was the same as last year and is very similar to previous years. I have it in my budget that is under tax levy. I know that there are supervisors that believe that the funding should come from the Economic Development Fund, and I understand that rationale, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. My concern only comes down to that with the Dominion money ending in roughly 6 years, then how do we fund that if we're funding KCEDC after 6 years? So I just kind of keep it with a consistent revenue source. But I understand the rationale.
What about funding it? If the board chooses to continue to fund it, what about funding it from sales tax?
The board can decide on however they would like to do that. It would just then be that sales tax, we could do sales tax revenues to fund that. That's not a problem.
Yes, Supervisor Ramdan.
Just a question on the issue with sales tax. Currently, the sales tax money we collect is part of our operating revenue, correct?
Correct.
So if we would take KCEDC out of sales tax, it's still coming, technically at the end of the day, it's still coming on the tax levy.
No. Go ahead, Paul.
It's county revenue, it's tax revenue, it's not levy revenue, but you are right. It is coming from, they're both general revenues, whether you pay one with the other, it doesn't matter. And if you do say KCDC should come from sales tax revenue instead of levy, there really is no difference. They're both general revenues. Unlike grant revenue, which must be spent on this, we have mostly general revenues, levy being one of them, most of the levy, and sales tax can be spent on whatever you want. So how you mark that in the end, in the big picture, doesn't make much of a difference.
Versus coming from the quote unquote economic development fund, then that would be different than if it was coming out of sales tax.
Which is in a separate fund currently marked for economic development from a different source being the donation from the Dominion plant.
Other questions or Supervisor Teske?
What number year are we in for, I'm not going to probably use the right words, but charge back from Dominion on the property taxes?
I believe we're in the 4th year that I did delineate that in my introductory letter.
And the total years was 10?
Correct.
And we are in the 4th year?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. We are currently in the 4th year. 2021 would be the 5th year. No, I'm sorry, 2021 would be the fourth year. And the chargeback is approximately $486,000. If there's no other questions, I'll go on to the library board, which is also.
Hold it
Sure.
under, on page 110, 639 and 639, those lines, 48,700,639, bug tussle, they both say bug tussle, 67 and 1,000 and 28,000. Is that,
Those-
that's new?
That's new revenue in the
New
respect
revenue.
that from with our agreement with Bug Tussle, they are making annual payments. So that is the annual payment towards the $960,000.
So, but it's not all of it, because 28,000 is interest, right?
Correct?
So that's new revenue then. The 67 goes back towards the 960,000, but the 28 is what
Yeah,
we're.
I understand what you're trying to
Okay.
say, Chairman Olson,
Very good.
is, yes, the 67 would be the principal payment back from the 960 that we had loaned Bug Tussle, and the 26,000 is interest income that we would have
And-
generated.
And that 67, then that goes back to,
Both
where
the
we-
principal and the interest would go back into the Economic Development Fund.
okay, very good. Thank you.
Going back to page 108 with the library, Act 420 payments. Again, this is always a touchy subject. Because of state law, neighboring counties that have a library system can charge Kewaunee County for services they provide to Kewaunee County residents. That comes out to roughly, from a historical standpoint, anywhere between $50,000 to $60,000 a year, usually around $55,000 a year. There's always been questions about, well, what would happen if Kewaunee County were to create their own library system? We could do that. The county could choose to do that, their own consolidated library system. But the actual cost of establishing a consolidated library system would far exceed the annual payments that we make to Brown and Manitowoc counties.
So we need to encourage people to read less?
No, good question. The best thing, and we tried to do some of this, but again, part of it is just convenience. The best way is to actually order your books online through either Algoma or Kewaunee Public Library. Because what will happen is if I wanted to order War and Peace and neither Kewaunee nor Algoma had it, but the Brown County Library did, if I order it through the Kewaunee or Algoma County libraries, Brown County will deliver it to our library. I can pick it up there, and it does not cost the county a single dime. But if I go to Brown County and check it out, then Brown County can charge us. So the rule of thumb is if you're needing a book from outside the county, do it online through one of our local county libraries, for one of our local libraries.
Scott,
Yes.
do the municipalities then get that charge? Does it pass down?
No, it does not. It's a county charge.
So we
And
don't-
again, state law. Next is on page 109, you see Build America Bond rebate. And you see how that has gone to zero, where last year or this year we had received money. The reason why there is no more rebate on those bonds is because with the refinancing of our debt, which were those Build America bonds, we no longer receive the rebate. But in the larger picture, by refinancing that debt and those bonds, we're actually saving we're saving about $400,000 in interest over the life of the refinancing. So it was a prudent financial thing to do. Next on page 110 with the Capital Improvement Fund, just making you aware as to its purpose. The fund is used to assist in the planning and purchasing of equipment and capital costs. We're coming close to it being at the fund balance level that we want, that we can start to buy equipment and vehicles through that fund as opposed to continuing to just do it through the general tax levy. The Economic Development Fund, also on page 110 there, you see the $500,000. That is again the annual payment from Dominion Energy. We get paid actually 2 times a year, $250,000, once I believe in January, the second one in July. So, and we are again in our 4th year, I believe, with that. So we're in our 4th year regarding that. The Business Development Loan Program, kind of a new line item there. That is to replace our county revolving loan fund that had been required to be closed by the state. And so that money had to be returned back to the state. But as a county, we did feel it was important to have money available to help assist in economic development for people maybe trying to start businesses or expand their business. And so we allocated $250,000 from the Economic Development Fund to not establish, but to establish the loan program that replaced the revolving loan fund. If we can then go to highway on page 117, you will see that the general property tax line for the highway continues to be the same levy amount as it's been since the last few years. You'll also see on 117 a transfer from fund balance. The department had requested $400,000 be taken from the fund balance to do some more projects. The administrator, I had recommended that that be $300,000. The finance committee did agree with that recommendation, but there was also an additional reduction. When we put together the budget, we do not get what, from the state of Wisconsin, we do not get what is the new or 2021 general transportation aid number. That's the amount of money that the state gives the county to maintain its roads. And so what we usually do is when that number comes in, and more often than not, we estimate on the low side. So when additional funds come in, what we do is we take that additional GTA funding and reduce the amount of money taken from the fund balance by that same dollar amount. So the finance committee did approve the reduction of the transfer from fund balance by $24,018 due to the increase in the general transportation aid increase. Also on page 117, you see winter maintenance. That's basically snow plowing. That was increased to $810,000 from what was $740,000 last year. And the reason for that increase is what we do is we take a 5-year average as to winter maintenance costs, and therefore we put that in. So some years we're above average, some years we're below average. If we're above average, if the costs are more than what the average is, then money is taken out of the Roads and Bridges Fund to cover those additional costs. If the costs are below that average, then that money that was not spent goes into the Roads and Bridges Fund for future costs that may happen when there are bad snow years. Going to solid waste, there are no items there. As you know, it was just 2 years ago that we closed the landfill. We created a long-term care account, and we continue to do that, and that is verified and analyzed by the Department of Natural Resources every year to make sure that there are sufficient funds in our account. Next, I would go on to Human Services. On page 139, again, looking at the general property taxes, What you're seeing is a 1% increase in the levy for human services. We know that there continues to be needs there, but we also need to balance their needs with the rest of the county. So I am recommending a 1% increase in the levy. But what you're
On the, going before that, up on the page just before, it says positions added 1. Is that referring to the contract position being made a county employee?
correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you see on page 138 where you see summary of FTE changes and you see positions added, we did not, while we added another county position, we did not add another body. What we had proposed to the executive committee was that there was a contract employee that was doing the work of a county employee, putting in the hours. And so what we were doing and what we'll try to do over the course of time is these contracted positions that have been with us for years, they in essence are county employees. And now we're just kind of, what do I want to say, meeting that obligation and making them county employees.
And what's the cost? There's no additional work, no additional employee, but what is the cost?
The cost is roughly $17,333, which is what was approved by the executive committee.
And the intention is to eventually add 4 more in addition to this one, which would be roughly $87,000 then additional, with no additional employees, correct?
4 times 17, about $70,000, yes, over the course of time. Also then on page 151, and this is in the CCS program or the Comprehensive Community Service Program, which is probably one of our larger programs. You'll see the line called Title 19 MA Medicaid. That is a revenue line that deals with services that the county provides and that we are able to bill for. And when we bill for those services, we receive reimbursement payments. And so you see a significant increase in the amount of revenue that is projected to be created. Part of the reason why is with the Human Services Department, we are taking a much closer look and stronger emphasis on having employees submitting more billable hours. We believe that that can be done. We believe that if we have a notable increase within the amount of billable hours that our case managers and county employees do, that we should be able to reach that target. The Human Services Department budget is extremely complicated because of the number of different programs and the different types of state and federal regulations. I wasn't sure how in depth that we would want to go. I would suggest that if people have more questions regarding the Human Services budget, they can come talk to me regarding it, because there's a whole number of different directions that I could go, and I'm not sure exactly what questions any supervisor may or may not have. So please feel free to contact me regarding that. If we go to the ADRC, I have no issues. We contract with ADRC of Manitowoc County. They have been providing our services for at least the last 5 years, for as long as I've been county administrator. The contract amount is the same as last year, and I believe it's also the same as the year before. Next, we go to information services. On page 167 in the revenue side, you see charge for services. And what that is revenue that is generated from a contract between the city of Kewaunee and Kewaunee County. Our IT department provides management and oversight of their phone and their IT systems. In fact, their phone and IT is part of the county system. And this has worked out very well. It has saved the city of Kewaunee money in the respect that they don't have to contract with an IT person to come in on an irregular basis at a high rate of high charge per hour. Instead, they can just talk to Ross. And for the most part, we have it down to a science now that there's very few items. And if there's hiccups, then Ross is able to respond very quickly since he is less than a mile from City Hall, as opposed to waiting for someone to drive from either Appleton or Green Bay. Also, you see on page 167 in outlay, the $14,000, that is to replace a server. So as always, we want to make sure that we continue to keep our IT infrastructure up to date. So that 14,000 is to replace a server. Next, I'm moving on to land and water conservation. On page 177, actually, if you look on page 175 first, where you see summary of FTE changes, you see a 0.5 position being removed. That comes from a recent retirement. We had Terry Albrecht, who had served our county for decades. She had retired in 2020. And so she was a full-time employee. We had Terry Markison as a half-time administrative support. And we also have Andrea Schmidt, who is a full-time administrative support, who was supporting the zoning department for when they moved over to the land and water conservation department. With Terry Albrecht's retirement, Terry Markison transitioned over to the full-time position, and we then did not fill the half-time position. So that saves a half-time position and the money involved with that. And that you also see in 177, if you see the wages regular line and you see the decrease, that is because of the elimination of that half-time position. If there's no other questions, we can move on to land information, which is page 187. In 187, you see transfer to other funds. Those are wages for a 0.2 register of deeds staff person that is there to do indexing of scanned documents. Some of this money comes from state aid from the Department of Land or the Division of Land Records at the Department of Administration. Last year I had slated for its elimination. I'm recommending that it stay in for this year. I have had conversations with the Register of Deeds, and what we will be doing is we will be identifying an end date as to how far back we should be going to index our records. Because if we could go back to the beginning of the county to index records, but from a attorney standpoint, land title standpoint, and the like, there isn't much value for continuing to go back no more than 30, 40 years maximum. So there should be a drop dead date as to when indexing should be finished. Next, I'll go to maintenance on page 194. If you look at outlay for 194, I want to make sure where I'm at. That is actually up at the top for roughly $121,875. There's a couple different things there. Part of it is the purchase of replacement of LED lights to replace our current lights, which will provide some cost savings because LED lights are much cheaper to operate than the fluorescent lights that we have. But the majority of that, which is about $100,000, is a management system that would help to oversee our HVA system and upgrade it. What we can do then is we can better manage our temperatures for both the hot and the cool months. Previously, it was I don't want to call it a Jekyll and Hyde, but it wasn't uncommon for me to go into Paul's office and be warm, or actually usually it was more cold. And then, but he'd go into my offices, which is not more than 20 yards away, and it would be 10 to 20 degrees warmer. So there was this discrepancy. So part of this purchase is to upgrade the system to allow for that temperature consistency, which therefore should save us money as well from a heating cost standpoint. If there are no other questions, we'd go on to promotion and recreation on page 203. The only item that I have there is an outlay for $26,500 is the purchase of a new vehicle, a new truck to replace the current one. Just as an aside, as a county, what we have done is we have adopted a procedure, a policy that we will buy vehicles and we will hold them until roughly about 60,000 miles, and then we will sell them. That sounds a little odd, but hear me out for a moment. We know that as a government, we are able to actually purchase vehicles cheaper than what most people can purchase them on the private market. In that same respect, we are usually able to sell our vehicles at a higher price because we are a public entity, and therefore those vehicles are usually maintained and well kept. So what is so magical about 60,000 miles? Well, 60,000 miles is the replacement of tires, replacement at times of doing transmissions, different things in that respect. So what we try to do is, if we do it this way, because what we've seen in the past is we've held cars for 20 years and they don't have a lot of miles, but they don't sell well. Why? Because they're a 20-year-old car. Even though the miles don't show it, we do not get the same type of return. So as a policy, we will be purchasing vehicles, holding them for roughly about 5 years, 6 years, and then selling them and then replacing them. If there's no other, and also for promotion and rec, if we go to pages 206 and 207, there's a variety of different projects. You'll see that there's a trail maintenance line. We're also looking to replace the docks at Hydeman Lake and West Alaska Lake. And at Ryan Park, we'll be purchasing a replacement UTV for the work out there at Ryan Park. If there's no other questions, we'll go to public health. Again, 225 through 227, because I don't want you to go through the myriad of different funds and grants that go through the public health department. What you see through 225 to 227 is the variety of COVID-19 grant funds, and those funds are being used to assist in the response of COVID-19. If I can, I would like to take a moment to applaud the efforts of Deanne Schultz, who's the administrative assistant at public health. I've never seen a woman that's able to do all these different grants and have it come out to the penny where we make sure that the county gets every single nickel possible as match. And then more often than not, what that means is that at the end of the year, the public health department is actually returning money back to the general fund because they did not spend all of the general tax levy that they were appropriated. But there's no way to know that at the beginning. So again, I just wanted to give some recognition to Deanne. As for register and probate and register of deeds, I really have no items there. So then if we go to page 260 for the Sheriff's Department. You'll see the various items that were requested. The number of squad cars is a regular annual thing. We have 3 cars that we will be replacing. With those cars is the computer terminals, the cages, all the accessories that are part of that. The squad car, which is maintained, that's on an 8-year rotation, so there'll be a new unmarked squad for this year. And then you see the 2 items, radio portable and radio mobile. The radios that the deputies are using are coming to the end of their useful life. So that's $140,000. And that would have, what we're doing there is we will use fund balance to pay for the replacement of radios. The radios roughly have, hopefully, closer to a 10-year life, so I felt comfortable with using fund balance to pay for the radio replacement. If there's nothing else, I would then move on to the county treasurer at 266. This is one where you're trying to predict the future. If you see in the interest on investment line, you'll see that what we had, or I should say, interest on taxes, I want to make sure it's right. It's the interest on taxes where we had budgeted a line, and it's much less than what we had first thought. And part of that reason why is we were looking at interest rates of 2%. And then COVID happened and it became 0.2%. So again, the amount of interest income generated for this year has gone down. And so again, if we want to be fiscally conservative, then we want to reduce our estimation as to what will be interest income in 2021. UW.
Can I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
So if we're going to be getting that much of a savings, which I don't know what the dollars equates to in all the different accounts and all the different loans that we have, are we looking at taking that cost savings and budgeting it? Or are we looking at that cost savings and paying on principal?
I think there's 2 different things that you're asking, Supervisor Vollenweider, so I'll try to separate them and see if it answers the question. So when we're looking at interest on loans, are you talking our debt? Or are you talking loans like to Bug Tussle and interest on the investments that we have? Which interest are we speaking?
This would be our debt.
Okay. So from debt, that went back to roughly about page 108. We spend about $1.5 million in debt payments this year and next year. So if there's additional money that we have, let's say at the end of the year, if that's what you're talking about.
Well, you're saying that we had loans that were at 2% that are now at 0.2%?
I'm sorry. It wasn't loans, Supervisor Vollenweider. I apologize if I misspoke. When I'm talking about the 2% interest, that's on the investments we hold, like treasury bonds and the like.
Because I know also loan rates have come down, so I didn't know if any of our loans that we do have, if that cost savings would be factored into paying down principal. So I misunderstood what you were getting at, but I guess my thought process was still we should be saving money on some loans.
And we have, because we did the refinancing this year, the other outstanding loans that we have are not callable yet that we could refinance, and they're at interest rates. They're at interest rates that it's very unlikely we could refinance to see any savings. We have most of them anywhere between 1.5% and 2%. So they're already very low.
Thank you.
Certainly. If there's no other questions, I would then go to page 275, UW Extension. And oh, sorry, was there another question? Oh, sorry, Supervisor Teske.
The investments, are the banks still taking money to invest?
Yeah, you mean like similar to the local government investment pool and
Right,
like, yes.
right.
In fact, I believe Nicolay Bank matches the interest rate that the LGIP provides.
So what is interest rate at the pool?
Finance director said roughly about 0.25 or 25 basis points.
Point
It's
two-
low, 0.25.
Usually they're always a little higher than our banks around here.
Correct, and that's where and they usually are, and I agree. And Nicolay Bank has also agreed to match whatever the LGIP does. LGIP, I'm sorry, stands for Local Government Investment Pool. That's a fund through the state of Wisconsin that local governments can invest or can deposit their cash into this fund and receive interest income. More often than not, the reason why local governments do that is because the fund becomes large enough that they are able to get better interest rates. But with the interest rate environment that it is, 0.25 is probably as good as we're going to get. And so that's what the local government investment pool does. And I believe Nicolay Bank also does match that rate as well.
Is there money invested anyplace else besides Nicolay?
Yes, we also have, I believe, some money in Bank of, if it's not Bank of Luxembourg, it's,
No, it's called ADM.
Thank
We have
you.
some CDs for them.
Yep.
They have a rate of 0.5 to 0.75%, which is great for this time.
other questions at all? Thank you, Supervisor Teske. If we go to page 274 and 275 with UW Extension, again, if you look at UW Extension under summary of FTE changes, you see positions removed 1.0. I am recommending the elimination of a full-time equivalent position and administrate a program assistant position. That position, that person has moved on to another job. We have currently 3 extension educators, and it was my feeling that 1 administrative staff could support those three extension educators. And so then if you go to 275 and look at wages regular and see that from 88,000 down to 41,000, that is because of the elimination of that 1.0 FTE position. Then finally, from a department standpoint, we have Veterans Services on pages 282 and 283. You see the Veterans Relief, and you see Veterans Relief and Donation Fund. They were 2 separate relief funds, and from an accounting standpoint, the finance director is saying, well, why do we need 2 funds that essentially do the same thing? So those 2 funds were just consolidated. So it's just kind of a housekeeping item. There's no financial impact. Then last but not least, on the 3rd page, just kind of gives you summaries as to some of the, what I'll call the big numbers, whether they come from my letter to the board or the county budgets and charts that are at the front of the budget. Again, I had a typo. Because total expenditures is not $224 million. I promise you it is not $224 million. It is $24,071,278, and the levy is $12,686,762. You also see that our net new construction is 0.659. That is probably the statistic that concerns me the most. Our financial sustainability and long-term health will only happen if we continue to grow, and that will only happen is if we have more development and more construction within the county. You also see that we have a fairly good debt rating at AA-, and that is stable. We have outstanding debt of $9.65 million, which is just a little over 10% of our legal debt margin. You also see that from a staffing level standpoint, we have a slight reduction in FTEs, 0.63. Then from the budget summary, you see the various different types of charts and tables. I could go over them, but I don't think I need to bore you with that. The one last item that I would go with is if you go on to page 6 and you see the tax rates, This will be the third year in a row that our tax rate has gone down. Part of that is because the assessed value of our property has risen at a higher rate. But either way, I am happy that the tax rate continues to go down.
Can you explain, same question I asked at finance?
Sure.
And I know that, I'm not, it'd be good to hear it again. We look at on the very first page there, it says, we look at total expenditures, it's a 6.21% increase.
Right.
Tax levy goes up by 2.64%. So if we go to the actual amount that we are spending, the question was, I was told it's a balanced budget, but we have about $500,000, $511,000 in fund balance applied. Where is that fund balance applied? And doesn't that mean that are we spending $500,000 more than what we are taking in or not?
I will, only because I could do it and I would make a mess of it, I will let Paul answer that.
Please.
Knowing you like short answers, the short answer is yes, but that extra spending is.
Yes is what?
Yes, we are spending more than taking in. If I heard the question right. I'm
Yeah,
still
it was a
going to
question. Yes, because to me, a balanced budget is I take in this much and I spend this much. Is that what we're doing?
Our total expenditures, 24,071,000.
Right.
Plus the transfers we'll get to later. Total revenue, 24,242. So the strictest speaking, no. We are using 511 of fund balance. We are also retaining 500 of fund balance. Now that we have 40 different funds, 33 we budget for. So I can't give you a short answer on that. But anytime we use fund balance, such as the highway requested $300,000 or $400,000 for additional one-time projects, the Dominion money, assuming we don't spend it, goes back into fund balance. So there's some ins and some outs.
Right, but that Dominion money is, time limited, and if we're spending that to make budget, that.
In this budget, we are getting 500,000, 2021. We are also getting the first of the 12-year payments for roughly, I think it was $92,000. There is nothing in this budget that says we're going to spend that yet. So that is going into fund balance. Now, if we look at, as an example, as the highway department, they have their normal levels of spending. They requested 300,000 more. That's coming out. We can go through all 33 funds to get this. This gives a big picture that we're putting roughly 171,000 more into fund balance than we are taking out. So my first answer, without looking at this first, wasn't correct. This year, which is better than last year, which isn't here yet, but it will be when this budget book is finalized. We're about 72,000 better than we were even in 2020.
Right. So.
What's making up the difference?
Yes.
This is what we didn't get to in finance. We have a number of revenue sources that increased quite a bit. A couple were just mentioned. Biggest increases in revenue are CLTS autism revenue from the state increased 304,000. CHIP program for the highway increased 293,000. Most of these have corresponding expenses of some amount. We're getting down to 50,000 for Youth Justice Innovation Grant. We talked about interest earnings being down by 120,000. So there are ups, there are downs. Again, keeping this as a short answer, when you lump them all together, page 1 is the big overall summary for the entire county.
And if I may add one more thing, because I think I understand where you may be going, Chairman Olson, is you're seeing that you say that we have expenditures and we're using some fund balance. So do we have a balanced budget? I would still say yes, in the respect that while expenditures may be more than what you had in revenues, you have money in another fund that helps to supplement that, I'll call deficit. The biggest question always comes down to this. you don't make that an annual practice.
Well, let me ask another question. Let's clarify this a little bit better. So we're taking money out of the fund balance to meet our expenses, right?
Some
Yes.
expenses,
Yes,
yes.
we're taking $511,000 out of fund balance. Now, you said money goes into the fund balance, money goes out of the fund balance. Okay. So at the end of the year, taking that 511 out, is there going to be the same amount in the fund balance? Is the fund balance going to be lower at the end of the year?
If we follow this exactly to the T, to the penny, which doesn't exactly happen, we will actually increase it because to the right of that, you see fund balance retained 683. It's going to increase if we hit this budget exactly perfect.
You may want to look at page 17.
Yes.
And that's where, if you're looking at what the fund balance was, and I want to make sure I'm doing this right, is the fund balance from the adopted 2020 budget was $611,000. And at the end of the 2021, it would be 683. So actually, we will have more money in our fund balance than what we did last year.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
one more
yes.
comment. You said balanced budget. Balanced budgets for accountants are easy to do. Debits equal credits. No big deal. The question is, where is it coming from? What's it being used for? Is it sustainable? And I'll say, yes, it's sustainable. We do have ins and outs of fund balance, but they're for one-time things. And this year in particular, as well as 2020, we have more going in than coming out.
Any other questions? Yes, Supervisor Wagner.
I would like to bring this item, I guess, before this full body. First of all, I would like to say there's only one other person, I believe, in this room, that's Supervisor Teskey, would have any remembrance of how long budget hearings used to be. 8 to 9 hours with an hour-long lunch break. They ran all day.
I also remember what the old budgets looked like.
They ran from 9 in the morning until 5, 6, 7 at night sometimes. So all of you people are really, benefits of what's happened in the last 20 years. But I want to get back to an issue we tried to adjust it at the last executive committee meeting. And we heard something about this earlier. We are not destitute in the county. We're not bad off in the county. No one has been able to show me any data or proof that there is hard times in the county and we can't afford to pay our county employees. Although there is data, hard numbers, showing that our sales tax receipts are going to be higher than what they were last year. We're online to make more in sales tax receipts this year than we did last year, which was a record. And the year before that. We worked last year many hours. I brought this up at the executive committee meeting that I was the only supervisor that attended every one of the department meetings so that I could get fullest sense of what the employees were talking about when we talked about the pay plan. We made radical changes to that pay plan last year. And I thought that we did a very, very good job of balancing between trying to make sure we had a sustainable program going forward, as well as keeping the employees with something that they could count on through the course of a career. I don't really believe cutting back to just giving the steps or just using COLA dollars for a raise is sufficient. As we heard Sheriff Joski talk about, the steps are what gives the employees a sense of balance, trust, whatever you have it. They can look at that and see where they will be next year, 5 years, 10 years down the road. That cost of living allowance is an adjustment that the county board can change and tweak as they want every year. And it should be something that is looked at. For the past 4 years, they granted, back in 16, it was 1.84%. The next year was 2.25. The next year, 2.17. And this year, we were only proposing 1.65. I don't believe that that was ridiculous. Therefore, I would move that we adjust our budget to pay the employees their step plan raises, as well as a 1.65% cost of living allowance for the 2021 year.
You're making a motion? There's,
What I said.
we're under reports.
I moved.
There's no.
Robert's Rules of Order is not proper grammar or proper English. I had a long discussion with past assembly member from this county, Larry Swoboda, about that. I also had some discussions. We're talking about this budget. Anything in this budget,
We're discussing the
anything in
budget.
this budget is open for a motion from the floor of this body.
We're
During any
discussing,
time where there's discussion of this budget.
we're not adopting the budget tonight. We're discussing it.
I'm not asking for a motion to adopt this budget.
Okay?
My motion was to change the adjustment in the pay scale that we're paying the employees, which will create differences in this budget.
We don't have the parliamentarian here, correct? Or is he here?
I already reviewed this with Corp Counsel.
Okay. Well, where's Corp Counsel to weigh in on it? He's not here. I'm going to rule it out of order. We're under reports.
I'm here virtually.
Yeah, well, I just asked. Yes, sir. Is it possible to make a motion at this point?
I was thinking about that today. I think the correct answer is you probably should wait, Mr. Supervisor Wagner, until the budget meeting next week. But if the board wants to move forward with some of these motions tonight, I suppose it's in order, but you might find yourself having a similar motion next week, or excuse me, not next week, but November 10th, when the whole budget is before the board. So
It's not.
I'm not going to say it's not out of order, but I think more appropriately, probably on the 10th. That's my take.
Well, that was a lawyer.
Based on that, I will remove my motion and I will wait until next month.
Very good. Any other questions on the budget? Okay. Moving on, committee reports.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
Scott, thanks for the outline. That was very helpful in going through picking out the highlights.
Thank you, Supervisor Romden. It's always difficult because there's always a line here or there that you could miss that people have questions about. And so I will automatically say this is not comprehensive and I could have missed something. I strongly urge that if anyone has any questions about any part of the budget, or for that matter, the charts or the administrator's letter, please feel free to contact me, and either myself and the finance director can talk to you about that and try to answer those questions. This is a 200 plus, almost 300-page document. And for some of you, this is your first budget that has 300 pages. And so for you to assume that you can read this and understand it all, I hope that you can. If you can't, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with asking questions either. That's why we're here. This has this is $24 million of spending and over $12 million of tax levy. So please feel free to ask any question.
Any other questions? Yes, Supervisor Lukes.
We were talking about the contingency fund and the fund balance. Is that the exact same fund?
No, they are not, Supervisor Lukes. When we talk about contingency fund, what we do from the county standpoint, the contingency fund is $100,000. And so what that is let's call that I'm going to be bad with doing this. And whenever I do this, I can tell Paul saying, you shouldn't call it that. But think of it as the emergency fund that if we go over someplace in a department, I'll give a great example is in human services that all of a sudden we had to have a bunch of kids that we had to place out of home, which therefore made us exceed our human services budget by $20,000. Well, then the Human Services Department, by law, doesn't have that extra $20,000. They will then go to the Finance Committee and ask for a transfer of $20,000 from the contingency fund to the Human Services budget to pay for those extra costs. That is different than the fund balance. As the finance director has talked about, there's over 30 plus different funds. And when we usually think of the fund balance, we're thinking of the general fund. And that is basically all of the money that we have in the general fund. And that well exceeds what we have as $100,000. That's all of our investments. That's all of our cash on hand. It's all of those things.
So if the contingency fund doesn't get used, where does that money go then?
It goes to the general fund. And also, just for another quick little plug of which I have to commend the Finance Committee is as a county through the Finance Committee, we've adopted the policy that the Finance Committee adopts at the end of at the close of every fiscal year that if there's a surplus from a general fund standpoint, 10% of that surplus then goes into the debt service fund to help prepay debt. So if let's say we had a $500,000 surplus at the end of 2020, $50,000 of that would go to the debt service fund to help prepay additional debt. So that way we can get that debt put down faster, as well as that helps the taxpayers as well.
Paul, you had something to weigh in on this?
Yeah, just to finish up the budget comments. So the Finance Committee has been reviewing proposed changes since it was handed out in September. I have about 4 pages here of approved changes, some of which were just done tonight. I will send that out to every board member prior to the November meeting, so you have time to look at it. If you have, with some explanation, obviously I can't write a book on it, but nor do you want me to. But if you have questions on that before the meeting, give me a call.
Any other questions on the budget? All right. We will move along. Committee reports, highway, solid waste. Any questions? Yes, Linda.
On the Highway Committee minutes dated September 3rd, on the second page, on the top where it talks about expenditures, number 1, county truck. Shouldn't that be trunk? TRUNK? Not truck, it should be trunk. Is
We have that corrected or noted?
that right?
You got that? Somebody has that or supervisor?
I have every confidence in the clerk and Mr. Every that can be taken care of.
We'll get it.
And also, I think the highway department has been cutting ditches. I can only say County Trunk D because that's the only road I've been traveling on a lot. Cutting the ditches and the right of ways, and they look really nice. I'm assuming it's the highway department that's doing that.
Yes, that would be. I will relay that to Mr. Every and the staff.
Any other questions on highway solid waste? Executive committee. Yes.
I just have some typos on there also on the executive minutes dated September 14th, where it talks about the administrative assistant, emergency management. It says Augustine moved and Romden seconded to approve the filling of the parks caretaker position.
Yes, the Supervisor Wagner was nice enough to point that out. We've made that change, and that's being forwarded to the clerk.
And then what about on the second page where it talks about contracted employee to county employee? where discussion followed regarding what constitute a contract employee versus a contracted employee. Shouldn't one of them be county employee?
Yes, it should. You said on the second page?
Yep, that's the second page.
Anything else?
Yes. Yes, and then on the last page of those minutes, where it says motion to return to open session, Romden moved and Haskell second to go into closed session. It probably should say open session.
Yes. That would make sense.
And then I have one more thing, going back to Mr. Wagner's discussion on this pay plan. The minutes of executive committee dated October 13th. Do I understand that according to the minutes that the committee agreed now to give the employees their step up plus that
No.
1.65?
No, that is not correct. The motion was made to give them the step plus the cost of living 1.65. That came to a tie vote, was broken by the chair, and it failed. Then there was a motion made to give them the, rather than the steps, to give them the 1.65% cost of living adjustment. That motion passed. So they would, if the executive committee's action stands, they would receive 1.65% cost of living.
And that motion is at the top of the second page, Supervisor Teske.
Yeah, but I guess I guess I took it to understand that they'd also get their step up besides the 1.65.
No,
Okay,
that is not
All right.
correct. They would
All right.
receive 1.65%.
every employee.
Every employee across the board.
All right, thank you.
I said last month that under the reports, I said that I was not going to bring that back to personnel because I didn't expect really what our discussion last month demonstrated to me is that there's a lot of strong feelings, a lot of different opinions and no consensus. And that appears to, at least from, at least if we look at executive committee, that's still the case. I still maintain a 1.65% cost of living adjustment during this time, I think is very reasonable. And I think expecting 2.8 to 3.75% each year, especially during these times, I don't feel is reasonable. And, the full board, if somebody wishes to make a motion on it next month, they're welcome to do that, and we'll see what the full board wishes to do. But the full board, I've gotten endless correspondence on this back and forth. I find it interesting on the one hand, people attack the board, and I don't think that's too strong on some of the correspondence I received previously, for wanting to reopen businesses, and then want to complain that the board isn't giving high enough pay increases. Friday I went to a local establishment, got carry out for my family because, as much as my wife loves to cook for me, I tell her we have to try to support some of the local businesses, some of the local restaurants, and I asked them how they're doing. And I can tell you they didn't tell me, well, unemployment is only 3.8% in the county and times have never been better. So I disagree strongly with the assessment that we should be giving a 2.8 to 3.75% increase. And as far as that plan being, coming down from Mount Sinai, I've talked to people who were involved in that and have said that is not sustainable. But a 1.65% cost of living during these times, the fact that there has been some of the things that I have seen and read and all of it just is amazing to me. I personally think that I really question whether or not we made the right decision in not having any layoffs. Some of the departments had there's no question there were reductions in work. We kept everyone working. And to push back on a 1.65% cost of living, I personally, my opinion, is a slap in the face to the taxpayers. We'll take it up next month. If somebody wants to make that motion, that we give them the 2.8 to 3.75%, that's great. But you know what? People could make the motion that we freeze it all together too. And if that motion were made, for me, I would be willing to support that. But the board will do what it wants. We'll look at what the majority says to do.
I just have one other question.
Does that answer your question?
Excluding the 1.65,
Yes.
if everybody was just to get a step up,
Mhm.
do you have a dollar figure?
It would have been, we had it, Paul, I'm not sure what it would have.
I'm just,
the-
it
the
doesn't have
biggest-
to be exact, but
The
roughly.
biggest difference in that discussion, at least my impression for me was it would have been very uneven and you would have had some of the employees at the lower end of the pay would have been getting smaller increases than some at the higher end, the way it was previously, and that didn't seem right.
Thank you.
But the 1.65% compared to the whole thing is $47,000.
That's the
less.
1.65?
If we were to go 1.65 versus what would be the cost of living and the steps, 2.8 to 3.75%, that was $47,000 less, $47,000 savings to the county. That's what I believe is correct,
Yeah.
yes?
The
So-
administrator proposed with both the step increase and the cost of living adjustment would have been $137,695. The not moving anyone in the step plan and just doing a 1.65 cost of living increase across the board is $90,153.
Any other questions on the executive? Moving on to public health and veterans, any questions? UW Extension Committee, any questions? Land and Water Committee, any questions? Public Safety and Justice Committee, any questions? Finance and Public Property, any questions? Human Services Committee, any questions? Parks Promotion and Maintenance Committee, any questions? Business Development Loan Fund Committee, any questions? KCEDC, any questions? Broadband Study Committee, any questions? Public Safety Study Committee, and then under Public Health, Cindy, would you be willing to give us a brief report on where we're at with things in the county, please?
Hello. So over the last month or so, we've had a rough stretch. Our cases have jumped significantly. We are one of the highest burden per capita in the state. So it's been a couple of rough weeks. Our numbers are starting to slowly trickle down. So we're hoping to see that continue. We're at 106 active cases today. To put it into perspective, we were at about 160 2 weeks ago. So they're coming back down. We're hoping to see that continue. Our hospitalization rate has gone up. Over the first 6 months, we were averaging about one person hospitalized at a time. We're up to 7 today. We've seen as high as 11 in the last week or two. And the people that are hospitalized are significantly hospitalized. So that's kind of not been a positive turn as well. We've also taken a jump in our death rate. So we had hung between 1 and 2 deaths for most of the pandemic. And this last week we jumped to 5. So that was a significant change as well. As far as contact tracing, our office has been doing, I have to say, an outstanding job. They receive anywhere from, recently it's been 15 to maybe 35 cases a day that they're contact tracing, and they are able to complete that in the 24-hour period that they have to do so. We now have 8 contact tracers working for us, so we've contracted 4 additional people over our normal staff, and that's made a significant difference for us in getting those numbers done. As Scott mentioned earlier, we continue to do contact tracing on all of our positive cases as well as their close contacts. We are the only county in the surrounding area that is doing that. Other counties now have just turned to just doing their positive cases only because they have not been able to keep up. So I'm proud of my staff in doing that. Questions?
What is the average in being able to notify people after they've tested?
So we get notified somewhere around 48 to 72 hours after their testing, and we have 24 hours then to contact them. And for the most part, unless people are blatantly hanging up on us, we are talking to them within that 24-hour period. We're granted 48 hours to do the close contacts of those people, but I do have to say that for the majority of our cases, we have those done in that first 24 hours as well. As far as our schools, we saw some interesting twists over the last couple of weeks. So we started out with everybody open. Kewaunee then went virtual. Luxembourg Casco High School and Middle School took a 2-week turn and did some virtual there. Those were based primarily off of staffing needs, at least at Luxembourg Casco, because they had significant staff affected in their middle school. They have now reopened. Algoma has been able to stay open with some classrooms getting quarantined in entirety. And when we quarantine a full classroom, we're doing that primarily in the lower grades, simply because it's really hard to keep 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds separated out at 6 feet at all times. And so a lot of the things that they do, they just end up being in closer quarters, and we've had to quarantine a full classroom. For the most part in the high schools, we've been fortunate that we've been able to keep them out. We have set seating arrangements in those schools. We have a lot of cameras and things throughout the schools, so that the staff themselves have been able to help with that contact tracing to let us know who these kids are eating lunch with, who they're walking down the halls with, those kind of things. So that's made a big difference, and we've really been working closely with the schools on that.
How are the parochial schools doing, Cindy?
The parochial schools are all open. They've been very fortunate. I think the smaller class sizes sometimes helps them with that contact and the social distancing out. We've had a few instances where we've had to quarantine a classroom in a parochial school. And once again, that's because of the age of the kids, and with them being younger, it's just kind of fallen out that way that it's hard to figure out precisely if they've been 6 feet apart at all times.
St. Paul to this point has had no classrooms. Schools remained open the entire time in all classrooms. Not to say we couldn't end up with that, but excellent, excellent, just great vigilance by the staff, and really being careful goes a long way.
We've also been fortunate. We've been able to get into most of the schools throughout the county to start flu shots as well. So we've been out there doing that. Some of our school districts have not had their flu date yet. Kewaunee being in their virtual state, we had to reschedule that out. Luxembourg Casco Middle School and High School, we had to reschedule that. Those dates are coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we're hoping that by the end of October, first week of November, all of our schools will have received their flu shots as well. And we've also been, we're almost out of vaccine for adults for the flu. So that's taken off strongly as well. Any other questions? Yeah.
You said with the increase of deaths, that these people have other underlying health issues before they were tested positive?
Some of them did. However, the physicians that pronounced death have felt that the primary cause of the death was COVID related.
Cindy, how are we doing in the nursing homes, CBRFs, assisted livings? That's our high need people. So how are they doing?
Right. So we've been fortunate there as well. We have had 2 outbreaks recently in 2 CBRFs. And so we were able to handle that quite well. What happened was that staff members tested positive, and therefore spread to a few of the residents. But those have since cleared up. Our CBRFs and our nursing homes have really been diligent on what they're doing as far as not allowing a whole lot of visitation in at this point because it's been high in the community, but they're still working really hard to get these people the socialization in and amongst the building itself. So they're just really working hard, and they're in constant communication with us. I would say that that's probably one of the groups that I talk to the most on a daily basis. But for the most part, we have been really fortunate if you compare us to our neighboring counties.
Any other questions? Thank you, Cindy. First reading of ordinance, there are none. Consideration of meeting resolutions. Are we ready? Go.
A resolution approving final revolving loan fund closeout and agreement.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Supervisor Kinnard, second by Supervisor Swagel. Discussion, do we need an explanation of that, or is everybody clear on it, what they're voting on? No questions? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. A resolution authorizing, oh, sorry, go ahead. Don't mean to do your job. Just trying to move it along a little.
A resolution authorizing an application for an acceptance of county conservation aids, Bremerville County Park. Fiscal impact, 1,050, county contribution, 1,050, grant from DNR.
I have a motion. Supervisor Yankee, second. Supervisor Ramden. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
A resolution approving expenditure of funds, coronavirus emergency supplemental funding grant program. Fiscal impact, receipt and expenditure of CESF grant in the amount of $57,255.10.
Do I have a motion? Motion by Supervisor Poppy, second. Supervisor Haskey. Discussion. Supervisor
Is federal or
Swagel.
state funding, or what type of funding are these grants from?
Good question.
I believe CES funding is federal funding that comes through the state, which then comes to the county.
Okay.
So it's money other government entities are wanting to give away. And, well, you know, if people are handing out money, you got to take it.
Thank you, Chairman.
You're very welcome. Any other questions? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next resolution.
A resolution approving transfer of funds, public health budget adjustment. Fiscal impact authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of changes to grant amounts totaling a net increase of $47,123 from the state for the public health department.
Motion by Supervisor Teske. Do I have a second? Supervisor Baker. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
A resolution requesting that the state senate convene an extraordinary session to address 13 water bills passed by the Wisconsin Assembly.
Do I have a motion? Supervisor Wagner, second by Supervisor Gillett. Questions, discussion? Yes.
I would like to make one change to it, and I would like to add at the bottom of this resolution that a copy of it be also sent to the governor's office, as well as the leader in the Assembly and the State Senate.
Okay,
So that's Voss and Fitzgerald, as well as the governor.
we have that? Okay, Supervisor Gillett?
I just wanted to discuss that in the Land and Water Committee, I had voted no for this. But after further review, my concern was over such a large group of bills lumped together that sometimes you might get something snuck in that maybe you weren't particularly
Say it ain't
wanting.
so.
Yeah, but after reviewing spending a little bit of time and reviewing this, I believe the reward far outweighs any risk that goes along with that. And there's a lot of good funding opportunities in this. So just wanted to clarify that.
Very good, thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Consideration of ordinance read at previous county board meeting. There are none. Communications, resolutions from other counties.
From Winnebago County, a resolution to support pending legislation to amend hearing timelines for juveniles taken into custody to coincide with hearing timelines for children in need of protective services taken into custody, so that a day in which the clerk of circuit court's office is closed does not count toward the computation of the Chapter 938 detention hearing timeline. And from Brown County, a resolution requesting that the state senate convene to address 13 water bills passed by the state assembly.
All right. Kewaunee County events. Annie. Quiet month in Kewaunee. All right. No comments from the chair. Meeting dates. It is it's stated as proposed on December the 15th. It is actually already set. That is set, and it should be listed as 5:30. So November 10th is set at 6 p.m. December 15th is set for 5:30 p.m. We try to keep a light agenda on the December 15th so that you can get to your heavy dinner. Supervisor Teske assures me she is working on this. I don't know how all this works now with all of what restrictions we have or don't. Are you able to plan?
Well, I'm not for sure how the virus is going to go.
I don't
So
know.
if we still are going to be meeting here, my nephew will cater it here.
Oh, wonderful. I would be surprised if we wouldn't be meeting here in by December, but you know, I don't know that anybody can really make
I
that
mean,
prediction.
Are you satisfied to have it here?
I would love
catered
to
here?
have it here. This is a fabulous, I mean, this is nicer than most of the places I take my wife to dinner.
So,
This is better ambiance than I'm accustomed to.
okay, well, usually it's the board, their spouses, and also department heads and their spouses also are invited. So
Alright.
if we think we're going to be here in December, he will cater it here.
And when's the latest we can give an answer?
Oh, he's pretty flexible.
Because I think we could determine at our November meeting for sure.
Or even by December 1st, that's fine too.
Oh, okay. Well, we would have to set where our.
November 10th is
location
pretty
is going to
early,
be.
you know.
Well, yeah, but November 10th, we would have to, we would determine, you know, where we're going to have our next meeting then. So. we
Okay, I'll
could
wait
do
till the
that.
10th, but he knows he's got it, so
Yeah,
he'll
sure.
do whatever I want, I'm
Well,
sure.
we've even, you know, we've even got a dance floor over there for Supervisor Poppy and his wife, you know, after dinner. Okay. January 19th, Supervisor Romden, you wish to discuss that date, that proposed
Yes,
date.
January, and this is tentative yet, but January 19th, 18th, 19th, and 20th is the Wisconsin County Highways Association conference is scheduled for those days. And I was asking, I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not, but in planning ahead, if it does happen, I was wondering if we could have the January meeting on Tuesday, the 26th of January.
That would certainly work for me, and it would solve a problem for you at 6 p.m. Does that work for everyone if we just move it back in order to accommodate Supervisor Romden? Okay, so I would need a motion to move or to set the January meeting to January the 26th at 6 p.m. Supervisor Dell, second by Supervisor Masteler. Any discussion?
Thank you.
All in favor? Well, haven't passed it yet. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye, sure.
Now you can thank.
you.
It's opposed? Okay. Motion passes. You are very welcome. Supervisor Wagner. Second,
Second.
Volenweider, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mass